So this is Container Identity Working Group for June 20, 2018. Go ahead, Mike.
All right, so the first item on the agenda is an issue opened by Clayton after he did some research into implementing essentially identity volumes using CSI. I don't know if you guys noticed, but Flex Volumes recently went GA. We probably could have been more involved in that discussion, but we have an opportunity with CSI to fix some of the deficiencies of Flex Volumes. So I think that if anybody is considering using volumes as identity integration, it would be a really great spot to start digging into and maybe going to SIG storage and being more active in that area. So I just dropped the link to the issue in the chat. And essentially, the two major problems with the current implementation is there are major problems for implementers of identity volumes. Are that first off, the interface does not actually the interface to the CSI plugin does not actually inform the driver of which pod, of which service account the pod is running as, and any other annotations we might need. So if we choose to implement attached identity via annotations, none of that is actually forwarded to the pod. That's actually so we should probably identify what we actually want to pass to these drivers. Secondly, which I think is a more difficult issue, is that does anybody have questions on that first issue? It's reasonably straightforward. The second issue that I think is going to be more difficult to solve is that basically all essentially all volume attached detaches go through a central controller that runs in the controller manager called the attached detach controller. This makes it very difficult to run node only volume types. So it would be preferable for, we believe that it would be preferable for an identity implementer to not require the latency of moving through the attached detach controller. It's an extra hop. Essentially, what it's there for is to centralize how we control mounting and unmounting cloud persistent disks. We centralize that for security reasons, but it's unnecessary for these node local volume types. So we need to figure out how we can circumvent the attached detach controller when we are implementing these node local type volumes. So I think this would be a good area for somebody to dig in and start contributing. I think the first issue, which is probably the most important one, the one about forwarding the information that we need, I think that's an easy one to pick off. The second one, if anybody wants to handle that, I would suggest starting by discussing possible solutions in SIG storage. So yeah, that's kind of the update I wanted to give. Does anybody have questions? Oh, Clayton is also here. Clayton, did you want to speak on this topic at all?
No, I think you had a good coverage of it. I was pushing it through it for a related thing because there's a couple of other local volume types that people have been trying to write for a long time. And so I hit it and then immediately realized this blocked an identity, which is some of those other use cases that we're talking about were more like not quite something you'd want to do in Cube, but container identity or not quite the same urgency. Whereas with container identity, we've tried to push this. It felt like, so when we talked to Saad had been thinking about this. So Saad's the SIG storage lead. Saad had been thinking about this, but I think we probably just want to keep the urgency or attention on it in the 1/12 timeframe so that we can really see if we can move the needle. I asked some folks from the Red Hat side to help pay close attention and potentially help own some of the pieces. The design work around the bypassing attach detach is a bigger chunk of work that I don't even know that anybody on the storage SIG has thought about. The first one was just getting the info from the down to the CSI plugin.
Yeah, I definitely think it's an area that we can be more involved in. So especially potentially, I see a few people in here. I think you guys should pay close attention. Yeah, so I think that covers that item. Unless there are any questions. All right, Greg, do you want to move on to? Who's here to talk about the AWS IAM credential provider?
Oh, hey, sorry, I threw that on the agenda. I don't have any real insight into it. I've only sort of skimmed that, but I thought it was relevant to this group. So this is a draft KEP that's coming out of SIG AWS about providing AWS identities to pods. So I don't know if the people who are involved in that are here. I don't think so. But take a look at that if you're interested.
It looks like is it being driven by EKS?
I don't think so. No, I think it's coming from the implementers of the KIM tool.
Okay.
I think they're interested in sort of standardizing that behavior and moving it into under the realm of SIG AWS. Sure.
I think it might be better homed in SIG Auth or the working group. Well, I guess it would probably be a dual effort.
Yeah, like I said, I don't have any real involvement here. I just wanted to point people to that if you hadn't seen it.
Have you? Can you give a description of how they're planning on implementing it, or have not even?
I have not even dug in well enough to really describe it. So.
All right, cool. Thanks for bringing it up. All right, so now we have a update on the Windows group managed service accounts.
Yeah, so this is something that I was planning to pick up and start basically resume work on again. And so I initially started this off. I'd filed like an issue to sort of track this as a feature request. That was number 62038 there linked in the chat. I think my main question now is that as I go back and revise this based on the feedback from this group, does it make sense to go ahead and follow the KEP process so that way I've got something in GitHub where I can keep iterating on it over the reviews, and then we can get the history logged there instead of tracking it in GitHub or something like a Google Doc. And if so, is this something that I should put down a working group container identity down as the owner, or do I need to get approval from SIG Auth? How are we handling proposals like this?
Yeah, I don't think there would be a problem getting approval from SIG Auth, but I do think a KEP would be a better place to iterate on that doc, just because it makes it easier for individuals to comment on specific pieces.
Okay.
A GitHub issue, which is kind of difficult. You got to pull out chunks or quote chunks. But yeah, I think that'd be a good way to move that forward.
Okay. So if I go ahead and submit a KEP to Kubernetes community, do I need to get one of the someone specific from this working group to do the initial review of that to start that process?
Yeah, I would go ahead and CC SIGAuth proposals. I think it's a GitHub alias, and
Okay.
and then that way people will start to get eyes on it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that sounds good. But yeah, I'll get that out, and then I'll drop in the Slack channel as well. But basically, I started just where I was updating a little bit about what I think the new proposal will work, and it's largely what was suggested here. So I'll work on getting that fleshed out and then drop it there for review. So, okay. But that's the main thing I wanted to understand is just sort of, what my next steps need to be. So thanks.
Sounds good. We're moving quickly. I had one more thing that I wanted to notify everybody on. So we made a significant progress on token request during the 1.11 timeframe. So we added support for, we improved some functionality around the actual API, and we added support for a service account volume projection, which is so a projected volume is like a config map or a secret. It's not backed by storage, so now there's a new volume projection that will project a service account token with whatever audience you want, including an audience for the API server. And yeah, you can start using that. It's an alpha feature now. I think that I plan to push to get both the volume and the actual API to beta in 1.12. So if any of you have alpha clusters, please check it out and give feedback and send bug reports, and enjoy.
I did have so this is somewhat related to that. One of the things that I've kind of been pondering a little bit is, so we have token requests, and that is an identity that the kube cluster respects. Maybe a topic for next time, or for maybe like a 1.12, 1.13 kind of timeframe to talk about would be, if someone wants to use the token that the service account has to talk to other bits of infrastructure, how do we want to encourage people to access and use that token in the volume source? So like getting some concrete examples down, and potentially going back and adding them to the KEP around using the tokens in ways that might not just be the naive, like, yep, I'm a Kubernetes token and I've got it in there. Just so we can start talking about it. Like a case for OpenShift that we've been thinking through is we'd like the token that the cluster gives to be something that a registry proxy could use to pull images on the user's behalf. So separating users from the ability to pull images from a tenancy and security perspective. I wanted to kind of at least make sure we had a good set of use cases, and we get people who would be using this added to the KEP so that there's a good set of doc. Whether we add it to a KEP or start in the doc and add to the KEP is a little bit different. But the long-term goal for us is to kind of continually draw down our dependence on secrets in Kube for identifying who a user is, which means rooting out the ways in which a pod or the kubelet needs to act on behalf of that container. And there was another one, which was a CSI plugin that wanted to act on behalf of the pod. This was kind of the vault case. What would we do so that the CSI plugin could get access to the identity of the container? So that's service account as well, but would we do something where we actually can request a CSI plugin can go and get a service account token that is not the service account token that the end user has that sets an audience, like the CSI plugins default audience or something like that. So that's I probably will have some time to put this in a doc. I don't know if anybody else has use cases that they're immediately envisioning that aren't covered in the KEP today.
Yeah, I think we actually omitted some sections from the original doc just for the purpose of expediting its merge. So yeah, definitely. Please open an issue, and I'll try to work through some of those thoughts. Semi-unrelated, I would also like to eventually expose in OpenID at least a Jukes URL that exposes service account keys, service account public keys used for signing, and potentially an OpenID configuration so that these ID tokens would be verifiable using the OpenID discovery specification. So that's on my roadmap as well. And then I guess thirdly, we also plan on replacing the current service account admission controller, or we plan on migrating this service account admission controller to use volume projections instead of secrets. This is probably going to take a couple of releases for compatibility, and I'm not sure. Yeah, it's going to be a tricky migration. So definitely a lot of work to do if anybody's interested.
Can people hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, so all right, I think unless anyone else has something they want to talk about, we can just call it pretty early today. We didn't have a whole lot to talk about. Give it pause for anyone else to jump in, and then we'll call it. Okay, thanks everyone. Take some time back.
Thanks. Have a great day.